Sausage.
Hello, everyone. This is Attack the Backlog, the podcast where I, Mark Kuznez, tries to make a dent in their backlog one game at a time. This episode is all about Batman Arkham Origins Blackgate, a 2.5D side-scrolling-ish game that's set in the Blackgate Penitentiary, good old Blackgate prison. This is very much so a Metroidvania-like, which of course Asylum was very much so, but this is much more traditional in that it is 2D in many aspects, but it does have that three-dimensionality to it as well in some of the environments and whatnot. But this is another first for me, so we had Asylum City that I replayed, and then Origins, which was my first time with that, and now I have played the old downloadable title that maybe half of people remember existed, and we have a new low. I also realized when recording the Origins episode, or probably a few hours after I recorded it, playing all these games back to back to back to back to back. I'm going to be playing Night pretty soon. While they are all different in their own ways, they're also all very, very similar. And that is true of Blackgate. But what that means is it's really hard to keep talking about these games and have anything to say about them outside of, hey, let's talk about the story, or let's talk about the new environment, or something along those lines. That's a problem. However, this game, Blackgate, is quite different because of its smaller nature and the way it's designed and all of that. Story-wise, it's whatever. You have as your main characters, antagonists, Catwoman, Penguin, Black Mask, and Joker. So it is very much so a continuation of Origins. And I think the story is set immediately after it, roughly. So you are dealing with some kind of riot or shit happening at the prison, and all these villains who you have sent there in the previous game are now wrecking havoc, running amok, and you got to deal with it. And Catwoman is there because Catwoman wants to get in the vault and steal shit, because that's what Catwoman does. She's a thief. All right. It seems at the beginning to be very promising. And conceptually, it sounds like a great game. You take the Arkham Asylum formula, or you just take the Arkham formula, and then you squeeze it down into this basically 2D design, 2D game, 2D structure. Return it to that more refined, designed Metroidvania way of, you can't go here until you get this item and so on, and all of that. But it doesn't come together. First and foremost, the level design is atrocious. I think this is a incredibly poorly designed video game from a level design standpoint. I hated exploring this world. It's broken up into 4 different environments. You have the industrial zone, the administrative zone, the cell block, and then the lighthouse, which is very, very small. There's also a tiny little additional wing that might be part of the administrative section. I can't remember. It's only for a very specific story structure or a story segment near the end, so it's not really something you're exploring in any significant way. I don't even think there are any collectibles or stuff like that to find, but the level design of this game is so bad. And what makes it so much worse is that the map is one of the worst maps I've ever used in a game ever. I hate the map because there is a three-dimensionality to the world and you exploring it. So you are, for the most part, just moving side to side in a side-scrolling fashion. But there are times where a vent might be on the wall, or there might be a balcony in the distance, and you can go into the background or come into the foreground and so on in certain areas. That gives the world a bit of a larger feeling. Gives these levels that three-dimensionality. And that's cool. But it ends up feeling more like a gimmick than something that they utilize in interesting ways. There are areas where you're just going around in a circle, dealing with some enemies, and doing the usual hopping from gargoyle-esque thing to gargoyle-esque thing. And that's all fine, but it feels so dumbed down in a way that makes me wish, instead of, and I think this is one of the biggest issues with Blackgate, is how much they feel the need to stay in line with that Arkham way of doing everything. Because this game wants to be so much like Arkham, it's using seemingly Arkham assets. They're just a little uglier. They don't have nice cutscenes. They utilize a motion comic type of way of delivering the story that's not great. I don't love the art of the motion comic, and sometimes it's very bad when a character is in a distance. For instance, when Joker, I think, was first shown, he was at a distance and his face was just a white blank circle and then a red diamond. I think it was a hollow diamond. But I just saw this dude and I thought, what is this? Is this some dude wearing a diamond mask? What is this? And then it was revealed that that was the Joker. So the way they showed the Joker early on was with this diamond face. And when characters are talking, you'll just see a still frame of them, and they can't even add some minor lip movement to show that they're talking, which would have been something. So I don't like any of that. But in wanting to stay so true, so it has the same combat, the same counter system. So you're attacking, countering. You get enemies who are tougher that you'll want to jump over, the ones that use a baton, so you jump over them and hit them from the back. They'll have the knifing enemies. And it all works essentially the same. But since all the fights happen in a 2D space, maybe there are some that happen in 3D spaces, but even if it's 3D, it's still on a track. So even when the game does have three-dimensionality, even when the areas do cover a 3D space, it's still lane-based. Whether it's a track, so like a loop, or multiple planes, a background, a middle ground, and a foreground. That's how it always works. It's never a section that is fully 3D that you can now maneuver in 3D, because then they would really have to change the way it controls for those specific sections. So the combat is incredibly dumbed down in that way, and what's already simple in the main games, the 3D games, it's even more simplified to a point where it's just boring. And there's no challenge to it whatsoever. You have the same gadgets from the Arkham games. I'm trying to think if there's anything new. The one addition that's kind of cool, and you get this a little bit later on, but you don't really use it that often, is with the line launcher. You can now shoot the line to get across large gaps. And then by pressing the jump button, the A button, you can get on top of it, but you can keep doing this. And in certain sections, very few sections, you can just keep doing this to get higher. So instead of, say, having an area that you can only reach by double jumping, or not double jumping, from wall jumping, you can do this layering of the line launcher, which is kind of neat. But outside of that, it's all the same tools. You have your explosive stuff. I guess now you have an explosive gun, so you shoot the explosive gel, and then you can make it go boom. But you have your bat, claw, batarang, sonic batarang. And that's it. You don't get as many tools because you don't really need them. And what makes a lot of it all frustrating is that you have to there is detective vision in the game, but you use it in a very different way. Yes, you'll just turn it on to see things, but you have to hold it down to then bring up this big circle. Think of it like a magnifying glass, a spyglass, and you scroll it, you move it around the screen to find objects of interest, to find either maybe potential collectibles. There are a multitude of little side story things, clues that you can go after, where you'll find a clue and it'll be clue 1 of 3, 1 of 4, and then you can find all these clues to just get a pat on the back. I don't know if those also give you new suits, but you use this to find as well objects in the world that you can interact with in certain ways, whether it be a vent that you can use your Backlog on. And in some cases, like with vents, I think once you've investigated them, quote unquote, investigated them once, every time you come across them, when you just put on the detective vision, or you don't even have to do that, you can interact with them. You can use your Backlog. Until you do that first time, though, you're too dumb to realize you can do that. But with something like the explosive gel, every time you come across, maybe, for instance, if you get into a room and you don't know what to do, where to go, you're not sure, you go into detective mode and you see that there is a structure that is weak and you can destroy with your explosive gel. You have to, it's not investigate, you have to analyze. There it is. You have to analyze it every fucking time. So every weak structure that can be destroyed with your explosive gel, before you can use your explosive gel, you have to use your detective vision to analyze it so that you know you can do that. As opposed to the main games where once you realize that a weak structure is something you can destroy with explosive gel, you can just see it in the detective mode and then do that. Or if you understand that there's already a visual language and things that are destructible already look a certain way without utilizing detective vision, you can destroy it. That's not how it works in here. So you are constantly having to analyze all this stuff, and that gets incredibly tedious, incredibly fast. Another thing that's frustrating about the game, and I want to make it clear if I didn't make it clear, I think I said this is the new low bar or whatever. I hate this game. I think this is a terrible game. I think this is a bad game. I don't think anyone should play this. I think you'll get nothing out of it. And another reason for that is because this game's way too long. It took me, maybe in the grand scheme of things, this probably won't seem too long, but I think it took me, my end time, my play time from the game said just under 6 hours. But I died quite a few times and had to load, and as you would expect, this is a 360 game, played it on my 360. Load times are slower, maybe I'd say 20 to 30 seconds, depending on the situation. You're also loading when you're changing environments, moving from zones and whatnot. But it has maybe 4 or 5 false endings. There are 4 or 5 times where it feels like, okay, this is clearly this is the big moment. This is the last hurrah of the game. Now we're going to be done with it and we're good to go to Arkham Knight. And then something else happens and you have to keep playing. And then you reach another point that feels like it's the end, but it isn't. And again, and again, and again. And it loves to do these things that drag you around. The final thing before you reach a very anticlimactic boss fight with Catwoman is her setting up 5 bombs that are scattered across the entire game. 2 in one zone, I think 2 in administrative, or it might have been 2 in industrial, 2 in the cell block, 1 in administrative. It doesn't matter the breakdown, and it might differ from playthrough to playthrough because it varies depending on the last boss you fight. So I defeated Black Mask last, so she wired up 5 Oh, what were they? I don't remember. But if you defeat Joker last, she'll wire up his presence, and Penguin, some fucking penguins or some bullshit. I don't know. But I had to go then to all these areas and travel utilizing that terrible map. Because the thing about the map, too, I think I got away from that. I got distracted. But what makes the map suck is that because there is this three-dimensionality to the world, because it has these various planes in certain ways, and it will have sections where, even though it's still on the planes, still on a 2D plane, basically, you are going to a map, going to a vent or whatever, or turning around a corner, so that it's not just left and right, but you can be turning, and while still unable to move side to side, it is changing so that you're at like a right angle. And that, I guess, is why the map has to be 3D, and it is a fucking nightmare. I don't remember if I already said this, but there are times where you'll be moving to the right in game, in the actual game, but on the map, your character is moving to the left. And I don't think that is something that often happens, but it happens. And it is fucking... when you realize what's going on, you understand it. But it's still fucking so weird. It's so weird. And the map is just this fucking mess of all these things going all over the place. And you look at it and you think, okay, if I go into this room, there is a thing there that'll get me to this area. And then you get in there and then like, okay, wait, where is this? It's just the worst. And I really think this game would have benefited from being more of a unique game that was designed on its own with its own identity and could have expanded the story, given you a little side thing, given you something that was in between Origins. Well, I guess night happens after City probably, so it's ultimately that makes it even more of a thing that should have been its own story and design sensibilities and all that, because ultimately, who really cares? But I think if this was something that both visually and gameplay wise felt more like Mark of the Ninja, that would have been pretty cool. Give me a comic book style art. Give me something that looks like it's ripped from the pages of a comic book. Give me that kind of beautiful hand-drawn looking art with gameplay that really emphasizes Batman's shadow work, as opposed to just the brawling beefcake he is in the main Arkham games. But that's not what this is. This is a game that wants to be as close to the regular Arkham games as it can be. And it just sprinkles in stuff that makes it a little unique because of its smaller nature and all of that. The boss fights are pretty awful. A lot of them are super basic. The Catwoman one is incredibly boring. A lot of boss fights are just whatever fights. The Penguin one is super easy once you realize how to deal with it. There was a kind of cool one that... The thing is, some of them have some interesting design, but ultimately they all end with incredibly underwhelming finishes. So when you are dealing with Deadshot, the game moves to his perspective through his scope on a sniper rifle, and you have to make your way to him while avoiding getting shot. So you'll be moving through this area and hiding behind cover until you reach a point where you can get to him, and then you, I think, just punch him once, or you just grapple to him and it initiates the cutscene and it's over. So it doesn't feel that grand. It's kind of neat, but then never goes the extra step. It's like a first draft of a boss fight. that needed more to it. It's just a huge letdown because it went on and on and on. It stayed so true to that Arkham formula, and it didn't work. It didn't work being shrunken down into this formula. I don't want to go so far as to say I regret playing it, but I didn't enjoy playing it, and I wouldn't recommend anyone else play it. I have no interest to go back to it and play more, to do New Game Plus, to find all the collectibles. There's a lot of crap to find, but what makes that just such a terrible idea to me is that, again, the level design is atrocious. I don't want to deal with it. I think the level design could have been alleviated to some extent if there was some fast travel system in it. But all you end up doing is that in some of the areas you can find an additional exit entrance point, which means that you can, in addition to going into a level at the starting area, there might be somewhere further down that you can get in there, and it kind of helps, but not really. It would be better if there were save points, because the game just is auto-saving all the time. And it's a pretty generous autosave. But it would be nice if there were actual, to stay into that Metroidvania type of design, actual save spaces that you could save the game. I guess having regenerating health is pretty fucking nice in a game like this. But something that allowed you to fast travel in some way or another. The controls, because of its desire to play around with this 2.5D type of thing, it can be finicky as well. So that gets in the way, and not just being a 2D side scrolling. But I think, again, what it would have benefited from if it just stayed to a 2D game and didn't have these multiple planes that you could interact with is a better, more digestible, understandable map and a better sense of control and just better everything. I am trying to think of anything positive to say, but it doesn't look so bad. Again, it looks like the Arkham games, just not as nice. So there's that. I guess it feels all right in combat, even though it's super basic and not really challenging. But it's just a huge disappointment that I am glad to be done with, and hope I don't remember in a year's time. But maybe the one positive thing I could say is that coming off of this, maybe Arkham Knight will just be so much better in my eyes, and then I'll love the Batmobile things because at least I'm not playing Blackgate. But I think that's enough of that. I'm trying to think if there are any other things I missed that I want to complain about the game. Complain about the game. It's a mess. It's an absolute mess. Don't play it. Anyway, that'll do it for this here episode of Attack the Backlog. Once again, I am Mark Kuznez. Y'all can find me pretty much everywhere at PX Sausage. If you enjoy this here show or any of the stuff I do and what have you, you can support me and my nonsense over at patreon.com/PXS. There you can get access to a monthly Q&A, the occasional watch party, a private Discord channel, along with some fancy Discord roles, and the random drop on the Patreon here or there, depending on your tier. Or you could just support me to support me if that is your fancy. In addition to the Patreon, you can find links to the site, the YouTube, the Discord, Twitch, and so much more over at pxsausage.com. That is the letter P, the letter X, sausage.com. But that is it. That is all. As always, thank you for watching or listening. I hope you enjoyed this here episode, and I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day. But for now, adios, arrivederci. Batman.